What would you do if the love of your life was brutally taken from you? Not only that, but you're arrested, charged, and even convicted for the crime. And for whatever reason, the authorities choose to ignore or even hide the evidence that could prove your innocence, including the eyewitness account from the only person to have witnessed the entire crime, your 3-year-old son. This is the story of Michael and Christine Morton. This is Night Owl. Good day, one and all. I'm Ted, your host, and welcome back to Night Owl. Today's story takes us to Texas. But before we get into that, if y'all could do me maybe a small favor, could you hit like and subscribe and share this video? Because it really does help my channel out. And you also may want to turn on your notifications, so you're kept informed on any new content that we come out with. With that out of the way, back to our story. They say everything's bigger in Texas. Well, I guess that would include tragedy as well. Today, we're talking about Michael and Christine Morton. Now, Michael was born on August 12th, 1954, and his family lived in a place called Waco, Texas. And then they moved around to different towns throughout California. And then eventually, they settled in a place called Kilgore, Texas. Then, in 1976, he was at a university called the Stephen F. Austin State University, where he was studying psychology. There, he met a pretty Catholic young lady named Christine Kilpatrick. Michael ended up dropping out of university, and the two of them moved to Austin, Texas in 1977. Now, he did plan on returning to university, going to the University of Texas, but I guess they would have ended up losing a buttload of credits. So they decided against it. Instead, they just settled for finding jobs. Then, in 1978, they were married. And in 1983, they welcomed Eric, their one and only child. Everything wasn't all that rosy, though, because Eric was born with a congenital heart defect that would have required surgery. But he wasn't able to take it or have the surgery until he was like 3 years old. But he did have his surgery and survive it. He definitely did. About 6 weeks after his surgery, they decided to celebrate Michael's birthday on August 12th, 1986. The day after that, Michael took off his job at around 6 a.m. His job was at a local grocery store. Sometime after that, someone came into their home and ended Christine's life in the most brutal of fashions. While she was still in her bed, and the whole crime was witnessed by their, at the time, 3-year-old son, Eric. Michael did not find out about it until he returned home. On September 25th, 1986, they actually arrested Mike and charged him with the crime. And he was actually convicted of it. Why? Well, actually, mostly based on a now debunked theory that states that a victim's stomach content can accurately tell when someone passed away. And his conviction came with a life sentence. But there was something that neither Mike or even his own attorneys knew. The DA's office actually had quite a bit of evidence that would seem to indicate that who did it was not Michael. But they just sat on it for, I don't know, reasons. Now, most of this evidence was all contained in notes and reports, as well as transcripts, that was gathered by their lead investigator, a dude named Sergeant Don Wood of the Williamson County Sheriff's Office. And that his evidence and notes actually also mentioned an interview that was taken with Eric, Michael and Christine's 3-year-old son, where he said it was someone other than his father that did it. He said that his daddy was not home, and that who did it was, and I quote, a monster. If anything, this case highlights why it would be so very important that even if you're innocent and you know you're innocent and you know they got no evidence against you, you probably don't want to talk to the cops without having a lawyer present, because stuff like this could happen. During Michael's incarceration, he was sent around to quite a few different prisons throughout the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. But he didn't just sit back rotting in prison, being consumed by self-pity. He actually used the time to better himself, and better himself he did. While he was in prison, he received bachelor's degree in psychology, as well as master's degree in literature. But Mike's fight for freedom did not end with his incarceration. In fact, there was a couple civil attorneys that was working pro bono, or for free. One was John Raleigh from Houston, and another one was Nina Morrison of the New York-based Innocent Project. Now, in 2005, there was a lot of techniques and technologies that became available that simply was not available during the original trial. So John, on the behalf of Mike, filed a motion to have DNA tested. The source of the DNA was a bandana that was found at the crime scene that had some of Christina's hair on it. And the thing about this bandana is I don't think it was publicly known that it even existed until this point. Now, for whatever reason, it actually took him a while to get around to testing the DNA. During that time, in 2010, Michael was actually given a parole hearing. But there was a bit of a problem with that. To get paroled, which meant he'd be free, he had to admit that he was regretful and mournful for what he had done to his wife. More or less, he'd have to confess to doing it. Now, Michael's lawyer, John, pretty much left that decision up to him. And he just asked, Mike, what are you going to do? I mean, he felt like it wasn't something he could really advise him on. This had to be left up to Mike and Mike alone. And keep in mind that Mike's already been in the joint for the past 23 years, very few people could have actually blamed him if he just said, I'm really, really sorry, just let me go. But Mike would not go for that. He was a guy of great integrity. And he was not going to lie just to get out of prison. So Mike told his lawyer, and I quote, all I have left is my actual innocence. And if I have to be in prison for the rest of my life, I'm not giving that up. Mike's lawyers were not going to quit either. I mean, they felt that if Mike's not quitting, neither are we. So they kept going after the court to have the DNA tested. And they were finally successful in 2011. Yeah, just, 6 years after they actually requested it. I know the wheels of justice are supposed to move, but do they have to move so slowly? Now, you may be asking yourself, why the bloody hell would it take them 6 years to get around to testing it after the motion had been filed? Well, that was actually because of one man, the Williamson County District Attorney, John Bradley. He, for whatever reason, fought against it. But eventually, a judge did have enough of that nonsense and said, no, we're going to test it. And as a result, it came out that the DNA on the bandana conclusively belonged to someone other than Michael. The man's name? Mark Allen Norwood. At that point, in October the 4th, 2011, Michael was freed from prison and cleared of all charges. And actually, Mike became the 45th Texas man who was convicted of a heinous crime and ended up being exonerated thanks to DNA evidence. Now, because of what John Bradley had done in trying to fight the DNA evidence from being revealed, it kind of cheesed off a lot of people. In fact, the Innocent Project filed a motion with the court to have John Bradley removed as the Williamson County District Attorney. But they had a change of heart and stopped pursuing the motion. And why would they just drop the motion, you may be asking? Well, that's because it seems that John Bradley also had a change of heart. You see, the evidence that was uncovered was so overwhelmingly in Mike's favor that John Bradley ended up helping Mike's lawyers. He helped get all the indictments removed, which actually helped Mike be able to collect compensation, some cash for his troubles, which God knows he deserves it. Under Texas law, if you've been wrongfully committed of a crime, then you're actually entitled to financial compensation based on how long you've been incarcerated. In Mike's case, that sum came to almost $2 million. Of course, some of it probably disappeared due to legal fees and whatnot. Now, I mentioned the actual perpetrator as being a guy named Mark Norwood. But who is he? He was a guy from Bastrop, Texas. He worked as a dishwasher and resided in Austin in the mid-'80s. And on March 27th, 2013, that's like 2 full years after Mike was released, Mark was charged and convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment for ending the life of Christine. But it seems Christine was not his only victim. In 2016, he was convicted of ending the life of a woman named Deborah Baker in her Austin home. This happened in 1988. And both women's passings was almost identical. It's not exactly the end of our story, though. You see, there was a lot of people that caught a lot of crap for what happened to Mike, including one guy named Ken Anderson. He was the lawyer that originally prosecuted Mike. In 2011, he stood up in front of reporters and said, and I quote, "I want to formally apologize for the system's failure to Mr. Morton. In hindsight, the verdict was wrong." Oh, really? You think so? Well, I hate to tell you, dude, but it's not the system that failed Mike. Not in this case. The failure came from you and your office. You're the guys that withheld information that could have set him free and that would have actually allowed the system to come up with a reliable judgment. Now, a lot of people didn't buy his apology, including Deborah Baker's daughter, who actually held the DA's office, along with investigators, at least partially responsible for her mother's life coming to an end. I mean, if they actually was looking for the right guy, then maybe, just maybe, her mom would still be counted among the living. And you know what? I can't blame her for feeling that way at all. I mean, I think most of us probably think that. Now, Mike's lawyers, who obviously did not like wasting time, on the same day that Mike was acquitted, filed a motion to have Ken Anderson investigated. You know, because he was like the top boss. He was the DA. So a court of inquiry was convened to investigate Ken Anderson. It's kind of rare. Their whole job is to check out claims of misconduct by elected officials and the sort. Now, what exactly was Ken being accused of? Well, if you've been paying attention, a lot. He was being accused of withholding information from, well, everybody, including Mike and his lawyers during his original trial, which even back in the 80s you weren't allowed to do. They still had a thing called discovery, which means any information one side had, they had to give it to the other. That's the law. And it's not even a state thing. I mean, pretty much every state in America has the same law as we do here in Canada. They have to be forthcoming with the information they have. And Ken didn't. He withheld everything, a lot of evidence that would have pointed to someone else doing it, including withholding the testimony of Mike's 3-year-old son, at the time, 3-year-old son. But now that's not the only evidence he withheld. Dig this. There was also reports from neighbors that saw an unknown man in a green van behind Mike's home around the time of the crime. And there's a transcript from an interview that Sergeant Wood of a woman named Rita Kilpatrick, which was Mike's mother-in-law, saying that her 3-year-old grandson had said that he saw a monster, not his dad, commit the crime. And other evidence, well, they know for a fact that the perpetrator, which we now know as Mark, stole Christine's purse and used both her credit card and checkbook to make several purchases days after the crime. There was also unidentified fingerprints at Mike's home, as well as an unidentified footprint in the backyard. Mike's lawyers found out about all this evidence when they made an open records request, at which point the DA's office had no choice but to give up all the information they had. And because of this, they were also able to depose Ken Anderson, as well as several others that were involved in the case. And so they had to give testimony while they were under oath. They actually got testimony from a former prosecutor on the case, a guy named Doug Arnold. Now, he indicated that Ken had revealed to him that he was not going to have Sergeant Wood testify at the original trial so that the other side can have access to those reports. On the 20th of February, 2012, the Texas Supreme Court convened a court of inquiry, and this court did discover that there was enough evidence to move forward with Mike's claim that Ken withheld and tampered with evidence in his original case. And the judge ordered all the evidence to be released so that all sides can look at it. Then, on April 19th, 2013, the Court of Inquiry actually ordered the arrest of Ken Anderson, to which they said, this court cannot think of a more intentionally harmful act than a prosecutor's conscious choice to hide mitigating evidence so as to create an uneven playing field for a defendant facing murder charges and a life sentence. You know what? That ain't wrong. I mean, that is horrible to think of. I mean, you think that, be it your lawyer or the DA's office, they're supposed to have the same goal, the pursuit of justice. But obviously, not in this case. Now, Anderson tried to beat the rap by claiming that he had immunity from prosecution due to the statutes of limitations. But nevertheless, on September 23rd, 2013, Ken Anderson, that was a judge at this time, resigned his position. Incidentally, his attempt to claim immunity because of the statute of limitations, statute of limitations didn't really work. On November 8th, 2013, Anderson was found to be in contempt of court. Anderson pled no contest to the charges as part of a plea deal that he took. Now, after the plea deal was announced, the DA's office had an announcement of their own. They were actually going to review every case that Ken Anderson successfully prevented DNA evidence from being revealed. Now, you may be wondering, what did Ken get for his misdeeds? Well, to start with, he got a sentence of 10 days in the county lockup. He was given credit of 1 day for the day that when he was actually arrested. He ended up only serving 5 of those, though. Now, that's not all. I mean, he had to pay $500 fine, and he was ordered to perform 500 hours of community service. Which, who are we kidding? Having to perform 5 hours of community service probably hurt him a lot more than the $500 did. But as part of a plea deal, he's told the courts that if they dropped the charges of evidence tampering, then he'd actually relinquish his license to practice law. Now, this is something I actually didn't know until I was doing this case. You give up your license to practice law, that doesn't necessarily mean the end of it. I mean, under Texas statute, you can actually reapply for your law license to have it reinstated after 5 years. I mean, I thought that once you lost it, you lost it. But I guess not. Anyway, on November 15th, 2013, Ken was released from jail after serving only 5 days out of his 10-day sentence. He got out early for good behavior. Now, on May 16th, 2013, the governor of Texas, someone named Rick Perry, signed a Texas Senate Bill 1611, also called the Michael Morton Act, into law. This bill is actually supposed to make a more transparent discovery process in the courts. And that is a very good bill. Now, you may be asking yourself, what did Mike do after the fact? Was everything said and done? Well, he did what most of us would have done. He tried to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. He was able to reconnect with his son, which, funny enough, was not as easy as a task as you may have thought. You see, his son actually refused to see him from the time that his son was 15. I mean, regardless of the fact that his son had actually seen the crime, saw who committed it, chances are he had little voices whispering in his ear, saying, well, you know, the court said he did it, and the court don't make mistakes, so he must be guilty. Because there ain't no way the court would make a mistake like that. But in the end, he agreed that his father was not guilty and that his brother was taken away from them both. So they moved forward as father and son. Incidentally, I guess you could call this kind of a happy ending for Mike. Not just that he got back together with his son, but he actually remarried. In 2013 at church, he met a delightful young lady named Cynthia Chessman. They got married and it's been together ever since. Now, was there anything that could have saved Christina's life? No, perhaps not. But so much of this tragedy must be placed squarely on the shoulders of the police and the DA's office. They weren't so intent on railroading an innocent man into a life sentence based mostly on a completely BS theory, then maybe, just maybe, they would have found the true perpetrator a lot sooner. Michael would not have had to lose so much of his life to prison. Eric, who had already lost his mother, would not have had to lose his father as well when he needed his father the most. And let us not forget Deborah Baker, who met her fate in the same hands as Christine a few years later. If they had continued their search for the true villain in this story, then maybe, just maybe, they would have got him off the streets in time to save her life. So much tragedy could have been prevented if the courts just remembered that their job was not to only close cases, but their job was the pursuit of justice. And it's a job that, in this case, they failed at completely. But I actually want to know what you think. What do you think the DA's office, the actual motivation was to suppress so much evidence? Not even caring that they could be sending an innocent man to jail. Do you have any insights on what their motivation could have been? And I got to tell you, I'm drawing a blank on that myself. But anyway, thanks for coming by. And please, as always, if you haven't yet, please remember to hit the like and subscribe button and to share this video. It really does help our channel out. And you may want to turn on your notifications too, so that you'll be informed of any of the new content we come out with. Once again, thank you for coming. And remember, be you good or be you wicked, everyone deserves justice. Good night.